Thank you very much, Michael. And it's a great pleasure to share the program with Chris, whose work I've admired and am intrigued with the program he's involved with that maybe he'll speak a little bit to, that talks about how we pull these pieces together at the University of Michigan. And in a prior administration, Bob Peck and I had a chance to plot and scheme a little bit to try and have the federal government lead by example. And the work that he did at GSA really was critically important. And I hope that with the new administration that there will be an opportunity for us to dust off some of those initiatives and to enhance them. Because the federal government is the largest landlord, landowner, and employer in the country. The Department of Defense is the largest consumer of energy in the world, and its inventory of infrastructure is almost beyond our ability to manage. GSA, I think, Bob, and we were working on some of these things, had an inventory of over 300 million square feet scattered around every major community in the country and a whole bunch of smaller but important areas as well. These are tools that are available to us at a time of fascinating opportunity. This stress, the economy is in free fall. Some of you may have noticed. But it is going to be an opportunity to fast forward things that we have been discussing in this room, on Capitol Hill, and a number of you are associated with members and organizations that have been moving forward on this. This is the opportunity to be able to align those forces and make a difference. I started working before a number of you were born on these issues, and the notion of livable communities was a good idea to strengthen neighborhoods. It was good for the local environment. It had some interesting economic opportunities, but it was kind of arts and crafts. It was something that was secondary. Maybe it was something that made sense in a left coast place like Portland, Oregon, but it's not exactly the meat and potatoes of public policy and activity. Well, we've watched as that has changed, where the notion about how we plan and organize our infrastructure, how we give people choices about where they live, how they move, and what the federal government incents through the tax code and our best authorizing process, and most important, what the federal government does. This stuff has moved to center stage. It's gone from the interesting and the desirable to the important, and now, with the economic situation, energy instability, water stress, and, global warming, it's become critical. This is the only way that we will stabilize and provide a sustainable rebound for the economy while we protect the planet. Focusing on infrastructure and transportation is a critical point of departure. We have more and better infrastructure than anybody else in the world, but it's in sorry condition in a lot of places. The American Society of Civil Engineers has given us a D- rating in their last report card, and some of you would suggest that they rated us on a curve. The infrastructure isn't necessarily where we need it. And as we look around the world, we are losing a race with many countries, large and small, that are making major investments in infrastructure for the future. China, 16 times our gross domestic product investment? India, 9 times on a sustained basis. There was a front page article in the Sunday Times talking about Dubai using their energy revenues to position themselves for a green and sustainable future. Dubai. I was proud to work to introduce the first modern streetcar back in Portland a few years ago. It took a long time. They're looking at it. They're bringing people from Portland, Oregon, to talk about having a streetcar in the Gulf. We are walking into the first window of opportunity over the next 3 to 4 months. The stimulus package is not going to include everything that some of us would like, but it's a lot better than anything that I have seen in my tenure in Capitol Hill. It's got a wide range of incentives and infrastructure investments that are going to make a difference, and it's likely to be followed by a major initiative dealing with energy, where more good stuff is on the way. And as is referenced, we are going to be looking at a major reauthorization of the Surface Transportation Act, T4. Some want it to be green T. But under the leadership of Chairman Oberstar, the subcommittee chairman, Peter DeFazio, they're already hard at work on the most significant transportation reauthorization since 1991. This is a window in this Congress where we will be moving forward on these elements to be able to jumpstart what we have to do as a country, as a society, as a world over the next 20 years if we are going to actually be able to meet the challenge that has been set to reduce greenhouse gases by 80% by 2050, which now appears to be the floor, not the ceiling. And with the feedback effects that we're seeing, it may well be that we need to be doing more for a whole host of reasons. But whatever that target is in 2050, what we do in the next 20 years will determine whether or not we change the shape of that curve. And in the next 20 months, whether or not we're serious, because we will never have a better opportunity than we have right now with the convergence of these forces. We're watching the American public be several steps ahead of us. Vehicle miles traveled, a critical indicator. And our friends at Brookings have put out, and maybe we'll hear a little bit more about it in terms of a great report, vehicle miles traveled that had been for years skyrocketing, increasing 3 times faster than population, twice as fast as vehicle registration, in a pattern that was clearly unsustainable, moving traffic shed after traffic shed to breakdown, posing problems of air quality, water quality, congestion, as we were sort of chasing our tails, and really just disrupting American families in terms of the amount of time and money that was spent just to get back and forth to work or the kids to soccer practice. Because of all, everybody had to drive. Kids couldn't walk or bike safely to school or soccer practice. The critical mass was something that was compounding the stress on American families while it was being a problem for the environment. Well, that about 2000, it looked like on a per capita basis that may started to level off. It's actually declining a little bit. And that is without massive change in government policy that created this dynamic in the first place. It wasn't an accident that the American love affair with the automobile was enhanced, where we saw these development patterns, where we saw families spend, in low-income families, actually spend more on transportation than housing, and it's the second largest expenditure for the typical American family. It was because of deliberate federal policies to incent that type of behavior. Free money for highways, but if you're going to expand the 2nd Avenue subway, you pay for that out of your own pocket. It wasn't a hard decision for most local officials and state officials in the 1960s to decide, well, we're going to go with the free money in roads. The only problem was it didn't much work. Well, we're seeing the public change. We're seeing the public realize that they want communities with sidewalks. Attached housing makes more sense for geezer baby boomers like me. Some of us in this room actually grew up in the Ozzie and Harriet era, where there were where half the families had children at home, and it was usually two, maybe three, two parents. No more. In fact, Chris Nelson has some fantastic research on the impacts of the demographic shockwave that we all should look at, because we're going to have, 430 million Americans by mid-century. Well before we hit that point, probably 2040, maybe sooner, we will have more single-person households than families with children. What are we going to do with 20 million McMansions that are scattered around the countryside? When too many communities are still rooted in the past, and sadly too many of our policies are rooted in the past. I've already probably talked longer than I should, but let me summarize with 2 quick points. One is we need to make sure that the reauthorization, the energy legislation, the tax legislation, the economic stimulus focuses on these longer-term problems, how we rebuild and renew America. We need to focus on that because that's actually where we will create more jobs. Fixing it first, and then transit and trails and bike paths. They create more jobs than a bridge to nowhere or just paving more out in the countryside. And it further will erode, as Chris and Bob can talk at great length, and I hope will, further erodes the value of existing neighborhoods and existing central cities, while it complicates the equation for us all. We need to make sure we have our eye on the ball in terms of getting the most economic impact out of this, and it's focused where we need it, and it's with the long term to deal with climate change and with carbon and job creation in a way that enhances the choices for communities and families. The last point, and I'll be talking more, and we maybe even cook something up at some point to talk about how we pay for all this. I've been in Congress 13 years now, and money didn't much matter when it came to tax cuts, what it did to the deficit. If it was a tax credit or a tax cut, that was kind of free money. Money didn't matter when it came to a war in Iraq. It's just on our grandchildren's credit cards. Thank you very much. Well, we're in a situation now where money matters a little bit, but you kind of wonder if you look at $8.5 trillion that we have spent or committed on bailing out the financial sector and trying to clean up this mess that relates to that. It looked for a minute like money didn't matter with $8.5 trillion. But we will have, $850, $900 billion real money towards targeted tax and infrastructure investments. And this will be our one chance where, for things that a lot of us really care about and have been working towards and that will have real value, this is a free shot. But starting next year, money matters. We're going to have to balance the books, deal with the fact that we have been living beyond our means, piling up debt. The Highway Trust Fund is in deficit for the first time in its history. It cost us $8 billion just to get through this fiscal year at the current level of programming. We're going to need a reauthorization that is $350, $400, $450 billion. Probably if we were smart and investing in the future, it would be $500 in terms of the partnerships that we need for the federal, state, governments, transit. How are we going to pay for that? Because we got to balance the books. So one of the things we're working on, we have some legislation that we'll be introducing with Senator Carper, Congresswoman Tauscher, that would take a portion of the cap and trade revenues and use it to rebuild our infrastructure in a sustainable, carbon-constrained fashion that will actually reduce carbon footprint. That will take some of the sting, because there will be some dislocations as a result of what we do in a carbon-constrained economy. We'll look forward to talking with you about that. We'll also be proposing some legislation to fund the transportation generally in the short term. Two markers. One of it will be increasing the gas tax. I know that some people think that's politically awkward, dangerous. I've heard people tell me, by cracky, 3-cent increase per gallon for gas. It doesn't make a difference whether gasoline is $2 a gallon or $4.07 a gallon. It's just unacceptable to the consumer. The same consumer who will walk into the mini-mart where they just finished pumping the gas and pay on a per gallon basis $26.70 for bottled water that they could get out of the tap virtually for free with a higher degree of confidence of its quality. Well, it's about perceived value. It's about marketing. It's about how you work with the public. Well, that's what we're going to have to do when we deal with fuel taxes. And part of it, we will be proposing that we eliminate the gas tax in the course of the next 10 to 15 years, because we're in a downward spiral of fuel efficiency, God forbid. We're going to get more miles to the gallon. We're still going to have wear and tear on the roads. We're going to have congestion. We're going to need to deal with crumbling infrastructure, but we're not going to collect as much money. And it's going to get worse over time. We need to transition to something that is use-based and get out of the gas tax altogether. Cap and trade, use-based formula. We can do this. My final thought is that those of you who are here working on Capitol Hill, whatever your capacity, you got a chance to be a part of the action here in a way that I've not seen in my political lifetime. In Washington, D.C., you make your own reality, and we're in uncharted waters right now. And those of you who may be recent addition to new members of Congress, these are concepts that are going to be advanced and refined. There are lots of great ideas around here that are looking for champions and making sure that as we have broader pieces of legislation, that the good stuff gets woven into the tapestry of what is going to be, I think, a major new series of initiatives. And you've got a chance to make a difference, unlike any that you've ever had before and probably ever will in the future. And we look forward to working with you to exchange ideas, plot and scheme together to be able to make our communities more livable and our families safer, healthier, and more economically secure. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Congressman. I think what we might do right now is, if anyone has any questions for Congressman Blumenauer, why don't we take those right now in the event that there's another vote or whatever. Any questions? Yes?
Will the initial stimulus package, do you anticipate it containing any incentives to increase private sector participation in financing infrastructure projects?
Why don't you say who you are?
Sorry, Aaron Brown, Skepnar. The question was, do you anticipate the stimulus package will include any proposals to incentivize private sector financing?
There are a series of challenges that we're facing right now. For example, in some of our energy arenas, we've been using tax credits, which are a little awkward if nobody has profits to offset. There is development of an initiative that I think is public knowledge, using some bonding capacity where the federal government would actually write down the interest rate, which I think has great potential. There will be infrastructure assistance to states, local communities, where there will be both money to them and some additional tools that are being experimented with. But the infrastructure itself that is likely to come out of this for transit roads, bridges, being able to repair, bike paths, dare I say, are going to have a salutary effect for private developers. It's going to be a signal of value. It's going to help stimulate local economies, and I think it will have a significant ripple effect.
Other questions? Jack?
Congressman, just following on that, Jack, as you know, the solar tax credit was renewed, the ITC was renewed this past October 3rd for another 8 years, which is great. Unfortunately, most companies and installers can't use these tax credits for solar because right now there's not a lot of profits to offset the tax credit. Blumenauer is going to start to look at some remedies for the solution, at least for the next 2 years or so, to what we can do with these tax credit provisions, either fundability or carryback or some other types of approaches. What is your current take on that?
People are well aware of this situation. There is a commitment on the part of the administration and their spokespeople in our meetings. A number of the people on our Ways and Means Committee, those are the only meetings that I've been involved with that are in great detail on this, but people are aware they've been discussing precisely those types of remedies or finding other applications that may be possible in terms of the funding piece that I mentioned in terms of loans that where we may just actually write it down. But I'm confident before the bill is enacted for the stimulus that there will be a longer horizon for alternative energy. There will be an effort to try and regularize some of the treatment and be able to make sure that we get past this current trough that we're in for at least, 18 months at a minimum. That's going to be necessary to keep the industry moving forward and making the progress that we need to diversify energy supplies.